Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer podcast. I'm Thomas Vick, joined by my friend Seth Wilson. Seth, how's it going today?
Thomas, I'm doing great. We were just talking as we got started about just what a privilege it is to be a part of a law practice and a busy law practice at that, and trying to navigate all the different things that are coming our way. And we got beautiful sunshine outside, and we've got graduation season on us. Central Indiana is kind of known for open houses and that kind of stuff. That's getting ready to be there, but just the air is full of excitement about kind of the next possibilities.
Yeah, it's about to be summertime. Maybe do a little bit of traveling. I know that you have been keeping the roads hot, trying to go up to northern Indiana for various reasons. So just that time of the year. So we were kind of talking about what to discuss prior to today's conversation, and we thought it might be a good opportunity to talk about client intake and maybe some strategies that we have in how we approach getting information from a client. And there was an article that you recently read that kind of made this come to top of the mind for you. Why don't you introduce that to us?
Yeah, so this is from The Lawyerist, and it's written by Stephanie Everett, and it came out May 12th of 2026. And the idea is intake is not a form. And where this kind of came up in my practice recently was one of our attorneys had sent around kind of a sample generalized intake form. And it got me thinking about, on that form, what is it that maybe we're missing with our existing forms? What gaps are we trying to fill in? And do we need another form? And so the article kind of caught my eye. And as I was going through that, I thought it'd be really kind of a good discussion for that idea that client intake is really the first impression someone may have of your firm. And I think it's really important that that be a good first impression. And so, what was maybe some of the learnings that you've had as you've had various iterations of a client intake process over the years?
Yeah, it's a really a critical piece to the success of a law practice, having an intake system. I began with Clio, so Clio has always been, at least at some level, my home base for how to bring clients in. But really, the starting point is with the phone call, making sure that the person that calls feels comfortable with providing information. It's a little bit of a tense conversation sometimes whenever the individual calls. I don't answer the phone initially most of the time at my law practice now, but I used to be the only person. So I would call, and I would have no idea who that person was and what their problem might be and what their expectations are. And so answering with a friendly voice saying, thank you for calling Vic Law. I'm Thomas. How can I help you? That kind of greeting, a friendly greeting, sets the stage for a better conversation. And that's probably where I would start. And then you're all ears for maybe the next 5 minutes or 10 minutes, depending on what is on that individual's heart, what's on their mind, what they need to get across. And you're just listening and you're taking notes. It's so critical to take notes as you're listening, because there are going to be details that client, who may be extremely stressed out, needs to communicate, and you're going to hinder the conversation if you have to go back to a point in a conversation and say, what did you say there? Just take as good notes as you possibly can. And then once they've had a moment to catch their breath, then you can kind of come back and maybe follow up on some questions. But I guess that second stage of the phone call is just make sure that you're listening, taking notes. And then towards the end, as they're winding up their, how they're describing their problem to you, then you really need to figure out, how are you going to move this thing forward? How are you going to get them to an appointment? How are you going to get them to that next step of like an engagement letter, or preparing for that consultation. And maybe that's where we can talk about when is the right time to send that client intake form. But I think that's where you really need to get, to keep your focus, is where you're having a good conversation, having a good first impression. I think one of the points in the article that you referenced was, if you're losing out on a lot of your consultations, they're not retaining you, you probably have a problem with just your intake system. Maybe you're not leaving a good impression. Maybe you're not listening well enough. There's just some step in the process that is causing a delay, causing a frustration, and prevents somebody from deciding to go with you.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is, where do you start at the beginning? And sometimes you actually have to go before the beginning, because you're building your clientele by every interaction that you have in the community. And so as you're out and about and meeting people and building that client base, you want to make sure that your methodology is an integral part of who you are. And so you want to be approachable. You want to be friendly. You want to be professional. You want to have demonstrated integrity and a solid reputation. All of those things will go into building that rapport with the client. And as part of your intake process to actually formally working together as attorney and client, that needs to reflect who you are and the trust that you've built. And so if you answer the phone in the middle of a project and you don't smile and say, "This is who I am and how can I help you," that's going to come across as, "You're interrupting me and I don't want to talk to you." And that's not probably the best first impression that you're trying to give someone. And so that, I think, is such an important point as you're thinking through that multiple hat idea when you're starting your firm, is when it does make sense to have someone who can take a little bit of a perspective break and not be so in the weeds on whatever's happening that a call is going to be interrupting that. Really an important thing. And I think your admonition, if you do any research on how to answer the phone and those kind of things, you will see people will say smile. Because whether or not the person on the other end of the line can see you, more and more we do video calls or Teams or Zoom or what have you. But on the phone, it may not be that. And so having that physical change helps get you in the right frame of mind to have that conversation, and help someone recognizing that oftentimes calling a lawyer may be a very difficult thing for that individual because of the life circumstance that's going on, because of unfamiliarity with the law practice itself, the nerves of just being on the phone in the first place, maybe the first time someone's called and made their own appointment. And so all those things are running through their mind, and you need to be the voice of calm and reason in that moment and be friendly enough to make sure that they feel heard and cared for, so that you can actually get down to, what is it that maybe we can do to help you.
Yeah. And let's just say that we've had that phone call with somebody and they are ready to schedule an appointment. When is the right time to send a client intake questionnaire?
Thomas, that's a great question. And I think it's something that we continue to refine even after, in our case, sometimes 50 years of law practice. And really, one size fits none. You almost have to figure out what's right for a particular scenario. And we've tried so many different iterations of things. And I usually kind of half jokingly explain that to the clients of, hey, this is just an idea. We're just trying to gather some stuff here. And what we've kind of settled on over the years that's worked much better for us than a full-blown, give me all the data that we'll possibly need and every variable that may ever face in this situation, is what are the basics that we need to get in touch with you? Your name, your email address, your phone number. Those kind of pieces of information that say, if I need to reschedule an appointment, I can get in contact with you. And I can do that hopefully by email first, because we have that written trail and it's non-interruptive to the day of the client. But if an emergency comes up, or I get, double booked because the court set a hearing on a particular day, I can pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm sorry, this came up. And so just having that basic first level of information, probably before I'm going to ask them for dates of birth and social security numbers and driver's license numbers and things that feel a little bit more invasive, even if they may be required given that situation. The client doesn't know what level of information is required yet because I haven't explained it to them. And so having that conversation and building the rapport and the trust helps kind of enable the free flow of information.
Yeah, I think getting a level of trust established before that appointment is important so that you can ask for information. And sometimes I have felt like, this person set an appointment with me. They're going to be coming into the office. I've got their name, I got their phone number, I've got their email address, I might even have their street address, but they were a little skittish on the phone, so I'm not going to ask them to fill out my estate planning questionnaire just yet. It's just not time. I haven't developed the trust and that feeling of security in the client yet for them to feel like they can do that. So I might wait until after I have met with the person and say, hey, this is kind of what we do for our estate plans. I'll need you to fill out this questionnaire after you have actually established the attorney-client relationship. And, when somebody has signed that engagement letter, that is proof positive that they trust you. You can they feel comfortable with whatever information they need to have. Have you ever had any experience with prospective clients or maybe even clients that are not willing to share information that you truly need for the representation?
Yeah, and there's lots of reasons for it, right? Maybe they got taken advantage of in a different situation, or they had a bad experience with another lawyer, or they've been a victim of a data breach recently, and all their information is compromised, and they're very high alert to that happening again and in a protective mode. And so you really have to focus on the situation and the issues that are facing them, both from a legal perspective and from that life perspective, and really then build that open line of communication and two-way street trust that says, hey, if I'm going to be able to help you, we need to be able to exchange information well. And that's a decision point that you're going to have to make as a lawyer of, if I'm going to constantly be at odds with my client over the most basic things that I need in this representation, maybe that's a sign that this won't be a great fit for our firm. And when you're in need of cases, that can be a hard decision to make. And as you grow and get a little bit more comfortable with that, you recognize, and that was one of the points in the article, of sometimes the intake process is a helpful screening tool for you to really identify, is this client going to be a good fit? So an example of that is, if you work with estate planning clients like we do, we work across a lot of different demographics. And some demographics are very familiar with email and client portals and electronic everything. And other demographics are not so familiar with that and not as comfortable with it potentially. And so you've got to balance, am I going to be mailing hard copies of the estate plan for review? Or can we get together and I can pull those up on a screen, or we can do a Zoom call or those kind of things. And so it's kind of the old paper versus plastic discussion of, which way do you want to go with that? What are you comfortable with? But really building a rapport for you and the client, as well as, how do you want your firm to operate? And is this going to be a positive interaction for us? Or maybe would they fit somebody that has a little bit different of a practice perspective?
Yeah, I'll share one observation that I've made over the years. Whenever I have a conversation and I send the questionnaire, I tell the client I just sent it, how quickly they fill that out and complete it is indicative to me as to how much they really need my services. If they're just, I can see that they opened up the questionnaire, but they didn't finish it, that might indicate, it's not perfect, but it might indicate they don't feel like they really need me just yet. And, it kind of changes your approach. I'm kind of thinking about the questionnaire being sent prior to, the client hiring me. If they haven't filled it out prior to meeting with me, they might actually tell me, we haven't met with you. We didn't want to fill it out until we had met with you. But it also might indicate, hey, I, somebody told me I should do this, but I'm not really committed to it. It changes my conversation with the client. So instead of, just talking exactly what needs to happen with their legal plan, it may be more personable, and it may be just, okay, let's get to know your family, let's get to know your kids. And it's perhaps a little bit more conversational. Sometimes people, call up and they know exactly what they want and they're ready to go, and they don't need a whole lot except for an attorney to say, you're right, this is what we need to do. But other people, they need to be kind of coaxed a little bit and persuaded at that initial consultation. And so the timing of how they fill out the questionnaire and how complete it is indicative of how to approach that consult.
Yeah, and you brought up something there, Thomas, that I think is worth discussing a little bit further as well, is if you have sent out a checklist or an intake form or questionnaire, whatever nomenclature you use in your office, and the client does take the time to fill that out and submit it, and you walk into that meeting without having reviewed it, that's also a communication piece.
Yes,
Could
it
be
is.
good, could be bad, right? It's not necessarily there, but if the client has taken the time to go through that, I think it's important as you build your preferred method of intake that you build in that step by step checklist to know before I walk into this meeting, I want to have reviewed any materials that the client has provided. I want to have reviewed the notes that maybe my staff has put into the system so I can walk in and say, hey, it's nice to meet you guys. I understand you have some questions about fill in the blank. And I've taken a look at your documentation that you provided. Before we get started, what questions can I answer for you? Or do you want me to walk you through my thoughts and show the prospective client that, yeah, you're on top of things. You had it all figured out and ready to go. That gives that peace of mind as well. And I've had a couple of those situations where it's, hey, did you get the thing? And I'm going, I didn't have time to check because I was in back to back to back to back appointments today. And so I haven't looked through it. Sometimes I'll just be honest with the client and say, I honestly haven't had time today to look through that. I meant to get to it, but let me pull it up right now. We'll take a look and go through it together. Then I'll put it up on the screen or do something like that with them. So just be aware of that as part of your process and your plan.
Yeah, if you can print it out and have it on the table on the desk in front of you, that just shows the client, I've prepared a little bit for this meeting. I appreciate what you've done to prepare for the meeting as well. I think that is kind of an unspoken statement of credibility if you have that on the table there with you. Another thought that comes to mind about client intake is understanding, and you kind of alluded to this, understanding the capabilities of your client. So your client is there with you in front of in front of where you're sitting, and you've settled on what needs to happen. But, for me, I often need to have, okay, what are your kids' names? What are their addresses? What are their phone numbers as a part of my record keeping and part of my estate planning process? And I know that if they leave the office, I will not speak to them again until they come back for the next scheduled appointment. And so it's a tough choice, but sometimes you have to choose, okay, let's call your adult child right now and get their address, let's get their email, and maybe let's call the second child and the third child and just make sure that we have everything so that when we lose touch with you, when you walk out the door, you're going to be able to come back the next time and we're going to have everything ready the way that you have directed us to prepare it, today at the signing appointment. And that can be pretty tough. That can be, a little bit of, you might feel like I could be using my time more efficiently here. And maybe you can have a staff member come in and help you with that. But a lot of times it's just me. I'm in the consult, staff is doing something else. So let's just go ahead and get to it and get the contact information that we need. Sometimes there's that, and it's a little bit of drudgery, but that sets you up well so that things can move faster after that consult.
And I think that underscores the importance of a good intake form because you need to know what are the pieces of information that I need in order to successfully move this project forward through our pipeline. And we've talked about that in the last couple of weeks. And so if you don't want to create a bottleneck in your system, sometimes you have to say, this isn't the most efficient in the moment. It's going to take me 5 or 10 minutes and I'm just going to be waiting and then writing down an address. That may be the most effective thing long term. And so that is a tension that you need to manage as you're working through that. And the way I sort of approach that is say, okay, we've kind of talked about the big picture. We've got an idea of what the plan is. Let's get to work. Here's what we need to do to get started. I need this piece of information. Do you have that? Nope. Okay, let's get on the phone. Let's give them a call. Do you have 10 minutes and we're going to go do this? And I try to start the inertia, if you will, of, hey, we're ready to get going right away on this and keep you moving through the process and begin that engagement. And I always use the analogy of, we play ping pong or we play pickleball, whichever you're most familiar with, but our idea is try to keep the ball on your side of the court or the table. And you can keep it over on your side as long as you want, but when you hit it back, I'm going to get to work on it and get it right back. But right now it's on my side, so here's what I need. And so I'm sort of setting up that back and forth and the expectation of how things are going to move throughout the rest of the representation by saying, it's on my side of the table or the court. We're going to get some stuff so I can hit it back over to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think having the estate planning form, for me, or whatever client intake form, having that in electronic format, but also having it in a paper file version as well is important, because you do have those different dynamics, giving people options. Have a questionnaire that a client can fill out, with pen and, or one that can be filled out with, custom fields, and it's beautiful and everything will sync really well. That's the preferred way so that it can help you with your drafting, but sometimes that's not possible from a client perspective. So just having those at the ready is something that is really, really important. And one thing that comes to mind regarding kind of the slow moving conversations and getting client information in a consult, I think that is an opportunity that's ripe for feeling impatient and where frustration can set in. The client feels bad about it. And then if the attorney piles on and says, oh, this is taking so much time, I got to go on to the next thing, that's going to leave the client with a really poor experience. And you're not going to be well thought of at the end of the representation. Again, it may not be the first impression, but it is one of the first impressions that the client will have with your law firm. And if they say, oh, this attorney, he's just an impatient guy, you're not going to get a great reputation, or you're not going to keep a great reputation in the community.
Yeah, I think it's so hard to, in those moments, remember everything that needs to be done. But if you can help be present with the client and help them feel like what is going on with them and your time right now is the most important thing that's going on, and try to give them your full attention because they've taken out a lot of their time, effort, and energy to come see you. Whether or not that's going to turn into a paying engagement really doesn't matter, because they're going to remember how you made them feel a lot of times. And I think for me personally, I'm not a big feelings guy. And so that can be very hard to, okay, I'm trying to make everybody feel good, but on the same token, I am kind of a people pleaser. So I know that about my personality. And as you're working through that, you want to make sure that they walk out the door, even if you aren't able to help them, or even if, there's a lot more going on, they're going to remember that you took the time out, the way that you showed care and concern for what's going on in their world is, again, part of that integrity that we were talking about at the beginning of, this is who you are, this is what your law firm is going to be all about. And if that experience misses at any point in the process, that's going to harm that reputation. That's going to harm that integrity. And are we going to do it perfectly? No, you're never going to. But I think the big thing is say, hey, I'm sorry I wasn't at my best, or I'm sorry the court's calling and I got to go and I got to take care of this. And I hate to cut this short or what have you, but just treat people respectfully and communicate well with them, and make sure that as you're scheduling, you kind of give yourself enough time or buffer between appointments so you can collect your thoughts and not take client A's stuff and bring it into client B.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that discussion, Seth. I think that was I always enjoy going back and forth, talking about ideas and how to approach client conversations and consults and client intake. So I think there's a lot there for people to glean from. We want to point everybody to our website, lifetimelegacylawyers.riverside.com. Go to that website, and there you can find all of our podcasts. You can also go to youtube.com and check out the Lifetime Legacy Lawyers podcast there on the YouTube channel. And you can email us at Seth@lifetimelegacylawyers.com and Thomas@lifetimelegacylawyers.com. Seth, did I miss anything?
No, you did a great job because we can never remember where all the various URLs are. And so if you can remember the Lifetime Legacy Lawyers, you can get to us somewhere. You'll find us out there. So we've got a LinkedIn page, we've got the podcast page where you can subscribe to that and get notification of new podcasts as they come up. I think we do a pretty good job of getting these out every week. And so hopefully you're gaining some benefit from that. We'd love to hear from you in terms of comments or questions and help you as you launch your law firm.
Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, Thomas.